Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's Florida Chamber Safety Council Committee meeting. My name is Crystal Campbell, Senior Director of Marketing for the Florida Chamber Leadership Cabinet on Safety, Health, and Sustainability, and I'll be your moderator for today's session. We have an informative agenda today focusing on heat safety, the newly published OSHA Heat Prevention Rule, and the incredible efforts our businesses are making to keep Florida's workforce safe. Before we begin, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping items. Attendees are in listen-only mode throughout the session. This meeting is being recorded and will be available for future reference. We'll have presentations from our speakers, followed by a live Q&A session. We encourage you to submit your questions in the chat at any point during the presentations, and we'll address as many as possible during the Q&A portion later in the meeting. Now, to officially kick us off, it's my pleasure to hand things over to Katie Yater, President of the Florida Chamber Leadership Cabinet, for a welcome and overview of today's session. Katie, over to you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Crystal. We're very appreciative of everybody taking the time today to be with us today to talk about a very important topic, especially here in Florida, which is the topic of heat. So hope everybody came through Milton okay, and if we can also be an additional resource or be helpful in any way regarding that, please don't hesitate to reach out. So first, I just want to take a couple minutes to review today's agenda and some topics that we will be discussing. We're going to hear from Brent Detka on the vision of this heat committee. We are then going to hear from Greg Hale, Vice President and Chief Safety Officer of the Disney Worldwide Safety, Health, and Engineering and Sourcing on Florida Heat Safety 101, Business-Led Safety, Heat Safety Journey. We are then going to open it up to question and answer. And as you heard from Crystal in the housekeeping section, we will do that through the chat function. We'll then cover next steps in our upcoming meetings as well, and then go into closing remarks. So this work would not be possible without our board that oversees the entire Florida Chamber Leadership Cabinet on Safety, Health, and Sustainability. We are very grateful and fortunate to have their strategy, their vision, and their passion to make Florida the safest, healthiest, and most sustainable state in America, and ultimately set the standard across the country. So with that, as I mentioned, the board oversees our entire leadership cabinet and our execution strategy on how we are going to achieve this goal. So Florida Leadership Cabinet Board oversees all three of these councils. We have subcommittees that meet on a regular basis to talk about the tactics and outcomes in those specific content areas. And then, as you see, we are joined here today on the Heat Committee, which is a specific topic area that we're bringing to the forefront on issues that arise that are very specific to a certain topic area to be covered. So now it is my pleasure and honor to introduce Brent Detka. Brent is the founder and CEO of Judson Marketing Group. He has been very involved and has powered over hundreds of businesses, from Fortune 100 companies to small businesses, to achieve growth through strategic business development, marketing, and sales. His most recent work, however, includes supporting the Disney Worldwide Safety, Health, and Engineering and Sourcing by implementing a mobile-first Internet of Things strategy within their Disney SyncLink portfolio. He has been a critical contributor to the Disney Global Beat the Heat initiative. And most recently, he has been appointed to the Florida Chamber Safety Council as our special advisor on heat. So with that, Brent, welcome.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Katie, and really happy to be here and speak to this amazing group. And, the Florida Chamber Safety Council has been instrumental in really organizing the efforts on safety, health, and sustainability. But this really couldn't be done if it wasn't a collaborative effort, what we call the three-legged stool. So this council was formed really with the interest to ensure that businesses throughout the state of Florida on this committee can act as advisors on industry trends and best practices to ensure that we're utilizing some of the most relevant innovations and technology to implement those practices surrounding heat stress mitigation and really kind of understanding our current environment. So Disney, underneath Greg Hale with Disney SyncLink Technology, really has been instrumental to utilize and advise on new technology that's been developed so that we can utilize heat safety research and technology to share those expertise on the standards and also the best practices. And this leg, can always be replaced by another company that's innovating new technology and creating new research or technology best practices. And that's why this tool is so important, because it's interchangeable with this business committee and also businesses really across the state of Florida. So this is part of Disney's corporate citizenship to ensure that outreach is being made and best practices are being shared. And then the last is the Florida Chamber Heat Committee, and this is really where these best practices are captured, packaged, and awareness is driven across the state and even across the country. This is an important topic, not just for Florida, but across the country. So we want to make sure that we're using the Florida Chamber Heat Committee as a conduit to drive education and awareness. This committee meets monthly. Best practices are shared often, and we're implementing new opportunities to drive awareness with this group. So I'm gonna share a lot of resources for you to utilize, but I did want to mention that when we look at OSHA's release of the first ever National Heat Safety Rule, these amendments that have been declared are a lot to digest. And when you look at what's inside of this, it really takes some effort to go ahead and unpack all of these proposed heat safety rules that are being addressed. So there's resources that are available to you so that you can understand what are the proposed heat safety rules. You can also understand what it means when it's applied to you. What are the form of measurements as it relates to working in these initial or extreme conditions? What preventative measures should you be taking, whether it's related to hydration or rest breaks or providing shade for your employees? And most importantly, it's training and education. And this is really where the Florida Chamber's supporting us with new programs to provide that training and education. And this is just an example. So this is a landing page that is created by the Florida Chamber, and it's an online resource for you to give you visibility into some of the most recent business tools that are being utilized across the country when it comes to weather-related information in initial and high heat conditions. There's training material on here, and there's also some interactive maps that are included. So I'm going to navigate and just give you some visibility into how this tool can be used for you and in your day-to-day business practices. And so you'll notice on the first part of the landing page is that we want to make sure that you're getting the right information that you need. So there's an opportunity for you to go ahead and fill out your contact information and sign up. And the objective here is to give you quick hyperlinks into those business tools to give you the right education. And the right education really means what's best for your business and your employees to ensure they have the right information. So this information is being collected by companies across the state of Florida and the country. We've captured those into a really easy to use format. We've given you plenty of instructions that, frankly, we've used at Disney to educate ourselves on wet bulb globe temperature and what that means and why wet bulb globe is so different from a heat index and why we should pay attention to both of those measurables as it relates to the proposed heat stress rules. And then also it's going to give you some quick interactive maps to engage and kind of understand what your environment is wherever you are in the country or in the state of Florida. And this is a new mapping application that was developed by the National Weather Services. We really like what this has to offer, just because, one, it is web-based. Two, it gives you indication anywhere you are in the country, and it gives you some quick visibility to select a location and give you what those current conditions are. These types of tools and resources are going to really help us to understand our current conditions and our current environments, so that we can make sure that not only are we providing our employers, but also our employees with the right information at the right time and place. So we've also given you some sections down here around OSHA, and with OSHA's National Emphasis Program that was released, there's a lot of really good information in there to get you started, and then more importantly, how to utilize some of these tools with technology and tips. So this is a set of applications that we're introducing from Disney and the Disney SyncLink portfolio that we'll double click into after Greg's presentation. But this just gives you some quick hyperlinks to take you to applications that you can use today to understand the current conditions that you're faced with out in the field, and if you're not sitting behind a desktop computer. And then the last piece is really sharing those best practices. And Fisher Phillips really did a great job of putting together really the 10 things that you need to know as it relates to OSHA's release of the first ever National Heat Safety Rule. And this gives you great sound bites in regards to the move that's been made, what the proposed heat safety rule is, where and when it would apply, and then also some things that you're going to be required to do, such as conducting regular heat risk assessments. And so this can be overwhelming at first, but as you start to utilize the tools that the Florida Chamber has provided, we've packed it in a way that you can easily navigate and start to become very educated, and then also use the opportunity to work with the Florida Chamber to go ahead and book a consultation session, which we've done. We've been working very closely with them to make sure that we're not only sharing best practices, but educating on what information is available. So these are just some key takeaways that we wanted to share with you. And if you look at the toolkit that's being provided, it's not just the landing page, but it's a set of guidelines and checklists and templates that can be provided to you, along with that custom heat safety training that I mentioned. And this is really useful because it's that expert-led training specific to your work environments. Regardless of the vertical that you're in, or the vertical that you're in, focusing on prevention and early symptoms as it relates to your workforce is really critical in this process. And then the applications, whether it be a desktop or a mobile application, providing real-time information as it relates to weather alerts, incorporating various reminders or rules that are applied by your business, and also the OSHA regulations that are proposed with regards to hydration or the number of breaks that you need to take. All of this continued education and training is going to be available to you if you scan the QR code down at the bottom right. This can help you get started with some of those offerings. But before we move on, it's really important that we hear from you all, and we want to make sure that everyone takes an opportunity to scan the QR code today and go ahead and answer some of these questions that have been put together. This information is really important for us as we're in this period to go ahead and react to these proposed rules. We definitely want to hear from you, and your input absolutely matters. So regardless of where you are in the process with whether it's heat stress awareness, understanding the proposed regulations from OSHA, you may have existing heat stress training material, or you may be new to all of this. Everyone is in a different place, and we want to make sure that we're capturing your feedback and your information and help advise and guide you along the way. And before I take a moment and introduce Greg Hale with Disney, I want to mention that at Disney, this journey for us started roughly 2 years ago when it came to heat stress, and we wanted to make sure that we not only understood the conditions that we were dealing with in Orlando, Florida, or the state of Florida, or even in California with Cal OSHA. It's also good to kind of understand the resources that are available. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and introduce Greg Hale, Vice President and Chief Safety Officer of Disney Worldwide Safety, Health, Engineering, and Sourcing. Greg?
Thank you, Brent. And good morning, everyone. It's really great to be here. This has been a very long journey that we've been on for the last couple of years to really understand heat, not because of pending OSHA regulations, but because of the impact it has on our employees, our cast members around the world, and our guests visiting our parks. We really wanted to understand it. So we started a research over 2 years ago looking at what do we need to know about this? How do we understand, best practices? What tools, technology do we want to deploy? And we really found out we needed to start developing our own technology with some state-of-the-art manufacturers to start to measure the conditions that affect our guests and our cast. So, Brett, if you go to I'll tell you the journey. Also, along the way, as Brett mentioned, we share our best practices as Disney, and it's part of a corporate citizenship goal that I was given by our board to help make the world a safer place. That we don't want to keep our know-how and our technology to ourselves just to make Disney safer than anyone else. We want the whole world to be safer. So to that end, we've been both sharing in information as well as sharing our technology that we use inside of Disney through partners that can make it available to the world. And so I'm here today because it's really hard to say no to Katie, as some of you may know, which she asks. So we've been really in close partnership with the chamber in forming some pilot programs for heat stress that several other large companies have agreed to be out there and parallel what we've been doing on there. We've actually deployed some of the technology on a power plant, a college campus, all kinds of different facilities, utility companies and others are trying it out, construction sites. And we formed this heat committee to really share our practices and what we learn by looking at each of these very different types of businesses and what we learn from that, collecting the data to really understand the environment, the conditions that our employees are in, and in some cases, like a college campus, you've got the entire campus environment for the students, and in our case, we've got guests all over our properties that we have to be concerned with their safety as well. And then that committee is also helping review the impact of the proposed rules and regulations, and both looking at, okay, what would we have to do differently than we're already doing as a best practice? What would we have to do differently to follow these rules? And is it effective? Is it practical? Is it reasonable to do that or not? And so in some cases, we're really trying to arm the Florida Chamber and other associations and the members of information they can use to actually comment on the rules and help try to guide the rules to something that is a little more effective especially for Florida and other high heat environments. And then make sure that we understand how they would be applied to a lot of different types of industries. So if you go to the next one. So To give you the timeline on the OSHA activities, they actually published an advance notice of proposed rulemaking back in 3 years ago, October 27th, 2021. And that's the first step they have to do before creating new rules. And that goes out for public comment before they even draft the proposed rules. They did that. And then on April 8th, about 6 months later, they didn't wait for even a draft of the proposed rules. They released a national emphasis program, which is a notice to fine and use the general duty clause for heat illness on targeted industries. And so they are actually out there now fining companies and investigating. If you've had OSHA on your properties, they often inquire about the heat conditions of the employees, and they are issuing fines now, even though there are no rules in effect, using the general duty clause to protect your employees. Also on July 2nd of this year, they went ahead and released the proposed rules. And then on August 30th, they started the clock for public comment on those rules. So until the end of December, 120 days is their public comment period. And then after that, they can take those comments and change the rules or not, and go through some economic impact assessments and other things they have to do. And these could be published as rules, or they could be tied up in court and other things that will drag it out, which is, I think, very likely that it's not going to sail through that quickly as the administration would like. But the one thing that to keep in mind for everyone is, since they are fining people today, and we're talking about willful violations and things are possible, all kinds of things, the proposed rules give you a safe haven. If you don't know what to do, and you are in good faith trying to follow the proposed rules and apply them, you've got a very good argument that you were doing the best you could do. You're following the best advice there was that OSHA themselves put out. How can they fine you for something willful anyway, when you're trying? And so that's often the case for these proposed rules, that they do become a set of practices that if you follow, it puts you in a good place if you have someone succumb to heat illness, and OSHA will come in if that happens. So if you look at what employers are required to do, and we'll recap this at the end, you've got to go out and assess the heat exposure of your employees, indoors and outdoors. You've got to monitor the workplaces near where they're working. You've got to have preventative measures to reduce the potential for heat illness. You've got to have training and education for all of your employees, and especially for your supervisors, to recognize the signs and symptoms of heat illness, and have a prevention plan in writing of what your plan is. And your responses, medical response to a condition when it is observed. Make sure you can take the right medical steps, and you've got to have record keeping. You've got to provide breaks during high heat condition, and we'll talk about that in a minute in more detail. But you have to actually provide a certain amount of time for breaks. You've got to provide the time to get to that break location that has shade or air conditioning, and they cannot be doing any work in that break area. It has to be a true recovery break. And this is one of the most impractical things they have for Florida in particular, is a graduated acclimation period for new or returning workers. So you have different rules for someone that has been in the heat in Florida working than you do for somebody who newly moves to Florida and starts working, or someone who takes a 2-week vacation. And if they take a 2-week vacation and stay in Florida, they're still acclimated. But if they take a 2-week vacation and go snow skiing in Colorado, they may have to have a reduced workload and working time until they get acclimated again. And so very difficult to operationalize that last one. So if you go to the next slide, since we've been developing these instruments and measuring, we actually went out and put over 70 sensors across our sports fields and other properties, and now we've deployed those around the world. We have sensors in Hong Kong and Paris and China and on our islands in the Bahamas and across our properties. And we've been really studying this. And what we tried to do here is look at the proposed rules and say, what if we had to follow those rules? We took 1 year from January 1, 2023 to December 31st, 2024. We said, let's take that year and look at what the impact would be. And I'm going to start with the bottom because that's the simplest. So heat index at the bottom. So when the rules that are in effect today in California just use temperature. At 80 degrees Fahrenheit, it starts extreme heat measures in California. 90 degrees is the high heat trigger for their most rigorous rules in California, and that's just temperature. So obviously that's a lot of time. OSHA proposed a heat index, which is heat and humidity combined, if you're not familiar with it, because humidity in Florida and a lot of places plays a big part, which it doesn't play as much in California. So they used heat index. And so, but still 80-degree heat index, we looked at that and we're over that trigger 257 days out of the year for over 10 hours average a day. So we're in it. You know, that's pretty much the whole year. We're over the trigger. And then 90 degrees, which kicks in some additional requirements, half the year, 153 days. We're over it for about 8 hours average a day. And so it really makes it impractical for us to use these kinds of triggers because you've got to follow them all year long, every day. And there's only a few days out of the year you could actually not follow them. So you're pretty much in these all year, and there's no triggers above these for what happens when it gets to 100 degrees heat index. There's nothing in the rules about that. So anyway, they're not very practical from that standpoint. And then the rules above are a very complex but accurate way of measuring heat stress on people and mitigating it. And that is using something called the wet bulb globe temperature, which the military developed over 40 years ago when they realized it's not just temperature that affects your ability to shed heat and not suffer heat illness. It's not just humidity and heat. It's the direct exposure to the sun. If you've worked in the sun and you worked in the shade, it's the same heat index, but very different if you're working in direct sunlight. If you've worked with a nice breeze on or you've worked in an area where you have no breeze, very different on your ability to sweat and evaporate your heat and shed temperature and maintain your not having heat illness. And the amount of exertion matters, whether you're doing very heavy work, very light work, and the clothing matters, whether you're wearing very light clothing or heavy clothing or PPE that might, so all of that matters. It matters a lot. And so they actually adopted a set of NIOSH regulations as an alternative that lets you really go in and measure the temperature, the wet bulb globe temperature in your area, and apply different sets of rules for the different exertion levels, the different clothing that people are wearing, and the amount of time they're in these different environments. And it's, again, very complex, but it's still, it actually can get you less time that you're in these triggers. If you look at light work for a acclimated worker, if you look at that column, it's only 84 days now that you're over that for only 4 hours a day. So you actually can have acclimated workers doing light work and have a lot less restrictions under that rule. Even very heavy work is only 227 days instead of 257 by the other heat index rules. So you can actually more surgically manage the true risk to your employees and heat stress if you can apply these rules. But that requires an assessment of the work and the exertion level and the measuring the environment and looking at the clothing they're wearing and whether you've got fans or a breeze that helps keep that temperature down. And so But the acclimated workers versus unacclimated workers, you see the difference. I mean, it's a big difference what they allow for exposure if you're acclimated or not acclimated. And we'll go into that in a minute in a little more detail. So I just wanted to explain that because you can look at the impact by heat index, but we are studying it based on the wet bulb globe temperature because we do want to be able to add fans, add shade, and take advantage of the reduction in heat exposure that gives you, which you can't do that if you're using heat index. It's always the same, whether you're in the shade, in the sun or not, and whether you have a breeze or not. So if you go to the next one. So, our call to action within Disney was to go out and really understand what are we doing today? Because we've been in Florida for a very long time. We deal with the heat. We deal with the heat in Hong Kong and Shanghai, and even Tokyo and Paris have quite a warm season, the hottest summer in the history of the planet. All of us witness. So we've been dealing with heat around the world, and we do have some best practices that a lot of our business units use. And then we have a lot of unwritten practices that different lines of business have deployed. So we're out there trying to understand and collect what are we doing today, and what's worked, what hasn't worked as well, and sharing among our own sites best practices and trying to look at, okay, what do we have to do different? Following the wet bulb globe temperature triggers in particular. And we're finding in some cases it's not a lot different. And I'll go through an example in a minute. And then in other cases, it may be very different. And but I think we know it's not going to be enough. It's not going to tell us what we need to do as a company. So we're doing things like changing the time of a parade. Instead of 3 o'clock in the afternoon in the middle of the hottest time, having the guests line up on Main Street and wait for the parade to start, having our cast members in costumes performing and exerting themselves at 3 o'clock in the afternoon in the direct sun. We've done things like shifted that time, shifted the level of exertion of the cast members, and things like that to really try to mitigate and manage through the day to still provide the entertainment, but avoid that high heat part of the day. So anyway, we're doing that now and trying to understand it. And then Brent will kind of take you through, but I want to take you through this one parking lot attendant example. So we took a role like standing in a hot asphalt parking lot. And by the way, we've given other seminars at the OSHA Expo, Florida Chamber Expo 2 years, showing what we've learned about the different surfaces. And it does matter whether you're on a grass surface or whether you're on a black asphalt parking lot surface, or whether you're in a windy area near a lake and getting a nice breeze, or whether you're in a enclosed area with no wind and direct sunlight. All that matters a lot in the wet bulb globe temperature. And so we've looked at a parking lot attendant and said, okay, that's going to be light work is going to be rest breaks are needed. We already give rest breaks at certain times, and so we're starting to try to understand well what would that look like if we followed the different regulations. And the total, if you look on that chart on the right, the total rest breaks by OSHA would be 60 minutes, and again, you're over these triggers for 257 days out of the years for the initial heat and 153 for the high heat. But it pretty much says you've got to do everything over here on the left for identifying the hazards, the heat illness, the training, the injury, the record keeping. And then you've got to start, when you hit these triggers, providing drinking water, break areas, time to get to the break areas, acclimation rules. You've got to have supervisors looking for the symptoms and signs of heat stress, and lone worker type of tools. If you don't have a supervisor watching directly workers, looking for that, and a method of alerting and responding. So So anyway, if you look at the chart below, I just mentioned that last one, the heat index. Just using heat index, that tells you, again, that example, that was on, I think, July 22nd, which was the hottest day in history. And you see how long we were over the triggers. It shot up and went over the triggers all day and into the evening on a hot day like that. So you've got to apply these rules all day, every day, really, in our summer seasons. So I'll let Brent continue to take you through some of this and talk about some of the key takeaways here for clothing and other things.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Greg. I appreciate it. And we just wanted to show you the differences between whether you're measuring from heat index or if you're measuring from wet bulb globe temperature. As Greg mentioned, there's some favorable measurables that are within measuring from wet bulb globe temperature, and this is what we've learned. So, using the same theme of the cast member parking attendant, knowing that it's light clothing and it's moderate work, and being in for heat index and a high heat threshold for the entire day, it becomes a little bit more favorable from measuring with wet bulb globe temperature, because you're actually measuring based on the acclimatization or unacclimatization period for the worker. You're also choosing light work, which is giving you a different range of wet bulb globe temperature, which is 86 degrees Fahrenheit. So you can see in the chart that previously with heat index, you were in high heat for the entire day. With using wet bulb globe temperature and applying the NIOSH rules, from 7 a.m. into mid-morning, you're still within that 82 to 86 degree threshold. And then it really isn't until you start to get into the late morning, early afternoon, that you get into to high heat. So what we're learning is that we can, again, apply those rest breaks and make sure that we're applying those rest breaks, but more importantly, having the resources that are available for, not only drinking water and break areas, but to ensure that, we've got some supervisory or a buddy system to observe those signs and symptoms, which allows us to be much more effective with our communication. So this is a really interesting space for us right now as we're studying wet bulb globe temperature and the impacts, and it's not going to change with what's regarding the proposed heat safety rules that are required. So this is what has been unpacked, and as Greg mentioned, we're taking a really close look at different lines of businesses, whether it be horticulture, construction, food and beverage, entertainment. But nothing is changing based on what's been proposed. So, as I mentioned before, wherever you are in the journey, and we started in many different places with these lines of businesses, but understanding the current heat temperatures in your workplace is probably the best first step, because understanding whether you're measuring with heat index or wet bulb globe temperature, what are your employees facing, whether it's road work or if you're a roofing contractor. It will apply to you outdoors, and it will also apply to you indoors when you look at your indoor facilities. But being able to measure that through technology and tools is a really important first step. And then it's okay, let me start to apply some of the proposed rules based on my conditions. And that's going to start to lead you down the path of what are you doing today, or what are some gaps in your business today as it relates to, say, rest breaks. And as Greg mentioned, it's not just the 15-minute rest break every 2 hours in a high heat condition. It's providing transportation from one location to the location that's the designated rest break area. And from a labor perspective, and this is just a plug for our next session, we're going to start to look at some of the labor and economics that are impacting employers. So it's not the 15-minute break, it's to the location, the break, and then back from the location. So 15 minutes could be 30 or 45 minutes that we would need to be responsible for. So we're really starting to look at, what are those labor pressures that are related to this. And then training and education. How are we providing heat safety training? There's a lot of training that goes into Disney globally. There's a lot of programs that are offered, but this really needs to be laser focused and specific to these rules that are being proposed, and what needs to be offered in these training programs, like acclimatization periods. That's a supervisor conversation with an employee to to maybe understand the environments in which they're going to be going to and from, and making sure that those unacclimatized and acclimatized programs are in place. And having your heat illness prevention plan, which would include emergency medical response. So, outside of record keeping and reporting and enhancing these protections, this is what we're doing today with the Florida Chamber and companies, frankly, all around the United States, and we're introducing the technology. And this is just a sample of 2 licensees that Disney SyncLink Technology is currently working with. This is a company by the name of Tempest. They're located on the east coast of Florida in Daytona. And we've co-developed this sensor, which is on the right-hand side. It's about 12 inches. It's lightweight. It's portable. There's no moving parts in it. And it gives you a portable weather system. And what we really liked about this technology that we integrated with Disney Heat Check is that it gives us observation for wet bulb globe temperature. It gives us heat index. Again, whether you're measuring with WBGT or you're measuring with heat index, it gives you those weather observations. But we just couldn't stop there. So on the left, we wanted to make sure that we built an application, and you can download Heat Alert on the Apple App Store or Google Play Store. But this gives you a really easy to use barometer on what your current conditions are out in the field. Again, your conditions may be very different if you're in a field or on a job site versus if you're in a warehouse facility, whether you're on asphalt, sand, clay, gravel. Those conditions will change, which is why we want to make sure that we're measuring in that sweet spot of about 6 feet off the ground in the environment. And this gives you your current conditions. It also gives you a recommended forecast by the hour for the next 10 days. So if you've got to move crews around based on conditions, you've got a really easy way to do that. And then it gives you your peak times throughout the day, so that if in fact you notice on, hey, Wednesday of this week, we're going to start to see temperatures in the 90s, and we want to make sure that we're providing water or shaded structures that are mobile for our employees. And the last part is the alerting, and this is the next phase of our application development, to give you not only the rules that are being applied or proposed by OSHA, but also what additional rules do you want integrated to keep your employees safe in the field. So again, it's not just about the weather observation. It's having a nice forecast of what to expect, and then alerts based on some of those conditions. So this with Tempest is a prepackaged offering. It's a prepackaged solution, but we understand that there is large business in Florida, and we're very close to our large business customers. And there's a lot of integration that needs to be done with some existing applications that are being used. So Heat Guardian is a licensee that we've worked with to develop their Heat Guardian heat shield. And this allows you, again, to use that same weather sensor, no moving parts. It can connect via Wi-Fi or over LTE. Gives you the capability to stack different applications. So I'm going to go back to construction. If you're on a job site and you want to make sure that you're not only measuring your wet bulb globe temperature or your heat index, but you can also integrate camera solutions on there. You can also integrate easy technology to stack, so that you've got one single source for all of your technology. And then also gives you an integrated rules engine as well, so that you can truly understand, hey, these are my current conditions, and these are the alerts that need to go to the hierarchy of my company to make sure that we're making the right decisions and we're forecasting properly for the future of that job site. So these are just two flavors of companies that we've worked with to co-develop technology. And as Greg mentioned, it's our corporate citizenship to ensure that we're sharing this with the world and that we're making this available to everyone, not just for the Disney use case. We've been using this around the world and then also domestically in the United States. So with that, Katie, or I'm sorry, Crystal, I'll turn it to you.
Thank you, Brent, and thank you to all of our presenters for those insightful discussions. We've now reached our Q&A portion of today's meeting. As a reminder, please feel free to drop your questions in the chat, and we'll get through as many as we can. So we will kick off our first question to you, Katie. They would like to know, how can the Florida Chamber Safety Council memberships support businesses and industries like agriculture or construction where heat-related risks are a daily challenge?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that question. And thank you very much, Greg and Brent, for the information shared today. I think it'll make us all better. Great question. Our Senior Vice President of the Florida Chamber Safety Council, Jason Mozo, is also with us today. But utilizing what comes out of Disney and a lot of other best practices, we tailor that down through what's happening and what's working and what's not working, and pushing it down market to the mid to small size companies that don't necessarily have that expertise on staff, like the expertise that Disney has with Greg or Brent and a lot of our other board member companies. And so we really tailor that specifically to construction. Jason Mozo has a background. He came from the private sector in construction. He's got a tremendous background in that, but it's all about not only sort of addressing heat from a holistic industry-wide perspective, but then really tailoring it to the individual needs within each organization, as well as the specific industries as well. So you can go in a lot more detail and depth with that by reaching out to Jason to really have those one-on-one conversations with him to see how it can be valuable and impactful for what you're trying to achieve.
Perfect. Thank you, Katie. Greg, this question's for you. How can businesses and other industries apply the insights and data-driven practices that Disney uses to monitor workplace heat stress and keep employees safe?
Thanks. That's why we really have rushed to get these tools available through the chamber so that they're right there on the website. You can follow up directly with and order these devices. That sensor that Brent mentioned, the Tempest sensor, is solar powered wireless. So we've deployed them all over. And like I said, we've probably got over 100 deployed around the world right now. And you can do the same thing. You can deploy a few of these, move them around. They're portable. So you can move them around and understand your real environment. And again, use this tool, the free tool for Heat Alert, and start to apply the proposed rules and understand, wow, if I had to follow this, we'd be taking a break right now. Or, maybe you realize it probably is a good time for a break right now, and maybe the rule is accurate for your workers. But I think that's what we're trying to do, is really try to understand what we're doing today and how different does it have to be if we had to follow those rules. And that will inform us to work with the chamber and other associations and to try to really influence the rules. This is the time. It's a 120-day public comment period, and then it closes. So if you don't speak now, you don't have any choice but to get what they're going to give you. So this is our chance to try it out quickly, understand what doesn't work, and push back on that. And at the same time, take a more practical approach to say, okay, how could I work within those rules and what works best for me to adjust? And if you do that adjustment now, you're not only learning how to do it before it becomes a rule, you're in a safe place for protecting your employees. So I think that's our goal here is through these sessions and the wonderful resources the chamber now has made available. You can do the exact same thing we're doing and really understand how this might impact your business and practice before it becomes an actual regulation of some sort, which is likely. There are 5 states who, Maryland just adopted their own heat stress rules. It is coming eventually. So you might as well be practicing, and I think the chamber wants to be the one that actually shares the best practices and influences those rules and comes out with what is effective, because we all want to protect our employees, and I think the chamber is going to let us come together and maybe put a practice out that's the best that has ever been proposed.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that, Greg. And we have time for one more question. Brent, this question is for you. Smaller businesses without dedicated safety teams often need extra support. How can these businesses utilize the platform's resources, like the Heat Stress Prevention Toolkit, to create effective heat safety plans and training programs?
Yeah, that's a great question, Crystal. And the small and medium businesses in the state of Florida is the heartbeat of the state of Florida. And it's not unusual for multi-million-dollar company to have an owner operator that's wearing multiple hats. And there's a lot of responsibility on that owner operator the morning that they wake up. And we'll just keep using the construction. If you're a roofing contractor, you're looking at 2 things. One is you're looking at your jobs for that day, and then you're looking at the weather to ensure that you're moving your jobs around based on those conditions. So for business owners in the state of Florida that don't have the resources that enterprise companies have, it's utilizing the chamber's resources that are available to you, so that you can use those same exact best practices that companies like Disney are using today. So we've taken the best of what enterprise is using, and we've cataloged that on the landing page, so that as an owner operator, you can start to become educated on what are the proposed rules today that OSHA is requiring. What are my responsibilities as a business owner to ensure that I'm keeping my employees safe? And then what tools and resources are available for me to use, so that, again, I can become quick and efficient to make sure that if I'm not following a best practice, maybe there's an environment that's a high heat condition that I need to start to adopt a best practice. So those resources are absolutely free for you today on the landing page. And I think we've dropped the landing page URL into the chat. Go on that landing page and just start to browse around. And as you start to browse around, if there's areas that you believe you need some extra coaching on, reach out to us. That's why we're here. That's why we built this resource for you, to make sure that everybody has the right information based on this opportunity that we have today.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Brent. And thank you again to everyone for participating today. Your questions and insights are what make these discussions valuable. So what I'll do next is pass it over to Katie to close out.
Wonderful. Thank you all so much for joining. And I'll just reiterate our appreciation from what Crystal had just shared as well. So we do have our upcoming meetings. We do have one scheduled for November and December, especially as we're going into the final comment period of 120 days, which is at the end of December. So here we have the 2 upcoming dates with the QR codes that you can register. Please share these with your networks and fellow safety professionals. The more we're able to sort of share one voice and speak with one voice, I think the more effective we're going to be on how we can make sure that we are absolutely keeping every worker in the state of Florida safe and not having any incidents of heat stress or heat illness or heat injury. But it's also done in a way that supports the private sector in that outcome. So you heard Brent discuss our upcoming meetings. We are going to be focused more on our labor and economic impacts of some of these proposed regulations that are with OSHA, as well as looking at some of the work comp data that we have going forward. So, please make a note of these days and times and register and share these upcoming meetings with your networks and fellow safety professionals, operation and HR professionals throughout Florida. So with that, we are very much looking forward to our spring conference as well. It'll be our 5th year. We do have extensive conversations at our leadership conference around heat, especially as we are moving into some of our hottest months here in Florida. So this will be a continued conversation at our May conference, and hope that you all plan to join us at that conference as well. So with that, very appreciative for everybody taking the time with everything we have going on in our day-to-day. But thank you so much, and I look forward to seeing you on our next calls.